Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Janmadhyasya yatam vayaritartaschatirshva vigaswarat. Tene brahma vridaya adikavaye mojantija suraya. Tejo varimrida jata vinimayo jatra trisagumrisa. Dhamnasvena sada nirasta kuhakam satyam param dhimahi.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
Offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
Offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth.
And the primeval cause of all causes.
And the primeval cause of all causes.
Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji.
It is she only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji.
The original living being.
The original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into
As
illusion.
one is bewildered by the illusory representations.
As one is bewildered by the illusory representations.
Of water seen on fire or land seen on water.
Of the water seen to fire, of land seen to water.
Only because of him do the material universes.
Only because of him do the material universes.
Temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature.
Temporarily manifested by the reaction of the three modes of nature.
Appear factual, although they are unreal.
Appear factual, although they are unreal.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna.
Who is eternally existent in a transcendental abode.
Who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode.
Which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world.
Which is forever free from the illusory representation of the material world.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
Dharma projita kaitravatra.
Dharma prajita kaitaputra.
Paramo nirmatsaranam satam.
Paramo nirmatsaranam satam.
Vedyam vastavam atravastu.
Vedyam vastavam astravastu.
Shivadam tapatrayon bulanam.
Shivadam tapotrayamananam.
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite.
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite.
Kimva Purer Ishwaraha.
Kimva Parer Ishwaraha.
Sadyo Hridi Avarudyatetra.
Sadyo Rudya Varidyatetra.
Kriti Bihi Sususubhistakshana.
Kriti Sususubhistakshana.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially
This
motivated.
Bhagavad Purana propounds the highest truth.
This Bhagavad Puran propounds the highest truth.
Which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
Which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in the heart.
The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The highest truth, the reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
Such truth uproots the threefold miseries.
Such a truth uproots the threefold miseries.
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity.
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity.
Is sufficient in itself for God realization.
Is sufficient itself for God realization.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other scriptures?
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam.
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam.
By this culture of knowledge.
By this culture of knowledge.
The Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
The Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam. Sukhamukad amrita dravya samyatam.
Sukhamukad amrita dravya samyatam.
Vibhata Bhagavatam rasam alayam.
Vibhata Bhagavatam rasam alayam.
Mahur ahorasika bhuvi bhavakaha.
Mahur ahorasika bhuvi bhavaka.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam.
The mature fruit of the desired true Vedic literatures.
The mature fruit, the desired true Vedic literatures.
It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukhadev Goswami.
It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukhadev Goswami.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this food has become even more tasteful.
Although its nectarine juice was already relishable for all.
Its nectarine juice was already relishable for all.
Including liberated souls.
Including liberated souls.
Shinvatam Swakata Krishna.
Shinvatam Swakata Krishna.
Punya Shravana Kirtana.
Punya Shravana Kirtana.
Vidyantakstohi Abhadrani.
Vidyantakstohi Abhadrani.
Vidunati Srihitsatam.
Vidunati Mati Surim Satam.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
To hear about Krishna from Vedic
or to hear
literatures,
from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad
is
Gita,
itself righteous activity.
is self-righteous activity.
And for one who hears about Krishna,
For one who hears about Krishna,
Lord Krishna who is dwelling in everyone's heart,
Lord Krishna who is dwelling within everyone's
acts
heart,
as a best wishing friend,
acts as the best wishing friend,
and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
and purifies the devotee who constantly engaged in hearing him.
Nasta presu abhadresu
Nasta prayeshwa bhadreshu
nityam bhagavata sevaya
nityam bhagavata sevaya
bhagavati uttamasloke
bhagavati uttamasloke
bhaktir bhavati naistake.
bhakti bhavati naistiki.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
In this way, devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental
As
knowledge
he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
as he hears more about Krishna from the
and from the
Bhagavatam
devotees,
and from the devotees.
he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
He becomes fixed in devotional service of the Lord.
Tadarajastamo bhava
Tadarajastamo bhava
kamaloba dayaschi
kamalobhadayasya
chita itar anavidam
Chita itar anavidam
stipam sattve prasidhati.
stitam sadve prasidhati.
By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional service,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion of ignorance,
and thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
and as material lust and avarice are diminished.
Evam prasana manaso
Evam prasanna manaso
bhagavat bhakti yogataha
Bhagavat bhakti
bhagavat
yogata
tattva vijnanam
Bhagavat tattva
mukta
vijnana
sangasya jayate.
mukta sangasya jayate.
When these impurities are wiped away,
When these impurities are wiped
the
away,
candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness,
the candidate remains steady in his position of pure
becomes
goodness,
enlivened by devotional service,
is enlivened by
and
service,
understands the science of God perfectly.
and understands the science of God.
Vidyate hridaya grantis,
Chidyante
chidyante sarvasamsaya,
sarva
siyante chasya karmani,
Chidyante sacha
drista
karmani
eva atmanishvare.
Drusta evatmanishvari.
Thus bhakti yoga severs the hard knot of material affection,
Thus the Bhakti Yoga serves the hard knot of material
and
affection,
enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram,
and enables one to come at once to the stage of assumption samagrama,
understanding of the supreme absolute truth personality of Godhead.
the understanding of the supreme absolute truth, personality of Godhead.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotees in Krishna consciousness
can one understand the science of Krishna.
can one understand the science of Krishna.
Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 19, Verse number 8. Tatro pujagmur bhuvanam punana
Tatro pajagmur bhuvanam punana
mahanubhava munaya sasisya
Mahanubhava munaya sashishya
prayana tirtha bigama padesai
Prayena tirtha bigama padeshay
swayam hi tirthani punanti santa.
Swayam yitirthani punanti shanta.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. At that time, all the great minds and thinkers, accompanied by their disciples and sages, who could verily sanctify a place of pilgrimage just by their presence, arrived there on the plea of making a pilgrim's journey. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. When Maharaj Parikshit sat down on the bank of the Ganges, the news spread in all directions of the universe, and the great-minded sages who could follow the importance of the occasion all arrived there on the plea of pilgrimage. Actually, they came to meet Maharaj Parikshit and not to take a bath of pilgrimage, because all of them were competent enough to sanctify the places of pilgrimage. Common men go to pilgrimage sites to get themselves purified of all sins. Thus, the places of pilgrimage become overburdened with the sins of others. But when such sages visit overburdened places of pilgrimage, they sanctify the places by their presence. Therefore, the sages who came to meet Maharaj Parikshit were not very much interested in getting themselves purified like common men, but on the plea of taking a bath in that place, they came to meet Maharaj Parikshit because they could foresee that Srimad Bhagavatam would be spoken by Sukhadev Goswami. All of them wanted to take advantage of the great occasion. Srila Prabhupada ki
Ki
jai.
jai.
when the Ganges was brought down from the heavenly planets by Bhagirata, she protested at first. She said, if you're going to take me down there, and all kinds of people are going to bathe in my waters and drop their sins there, and I'm going to be overburdened by it. How am I going to be able to purify all those millions and millions of sinful acts? Well, the answer was, yes, that's true, that millions of people will come and be washed of their sins in your waters, but also some great pure devotees will also come, and they will nullify all those sins. Therefore, you have nothing to worry about. So here we see a little similar thing that's being said, that the places of pilgrimage become overburdened with the sins of others. But when such sages visit overburdened places of pilgrimage, they sanctify the places by their presence. So that's the point, that yes, so many people are going to come, and they're all very sinful, and they're going to drop their sins in the waters of the Ganges, but some pure devotees will also come, and they'll nullify all those sins and save the burden from Ganga Devi. So this is very interesting, and obviously, if we don't have the commentary of acharyas, pure devotees, then we can speculate and make mistakes and not understand what is actual fact. Also, we can see that there must be some type of communication. Otherwise, how did all the great sages in the whole universe find out that Maharaj Parikshit was going to sit down on the bank of the Ganges or the Yamuna and hear Sukhadev Goswami? Therefore, so many great sages from all over the universe came, not just all over the earth, but all over the universe came. And that proves that in ancient times, when the whole earth planet was more pious, demigods and other great sages used to visit. Nowadays, people talk about it, they're called unidentified flying objects. Flying saucers or some kind of extraterrestrial beings coming and visiting the earth. But it's much less frequent now than ever before because of the sinful situation of the people. Usually, like in the Radha Raman temple in Vrindavan, whenever they have a sacrificial program, they spread out a lot of banana leaves and seeds, and they're reserved for the demigods. People might not see them, but and then Prabhupada says somewhere else in Bhagavatam that now the demigods don't come anymore because there's no prasadam set out for them. But the Radha Raman temple, they set out the prasadam for the demigods also. So it's very interesting, these points. So at that time, all the great minds and thinkers, accompanied by their disciples and sages who could verily sanctify a place of pilgrimage just by their presence, arrived there on the plea of making a pilgrim's journey. Well, most pilgrims, they'll go, Prabhupada gives the example, people living in Calcutta will go to Haridwar to take bath in the Ganges. Although the Ganges is there in Calcutta also, right? So, and there are a lot of people that bathe in the Ganges. There's this one ghat in Calcutta where you can go early in the morning, right after Mangal Arati, and there are literally hundreds of people there getting massages right on the bank of the Ganges. And after they get the massage, they go into the Ganges water and take a bath. And It's very interesting. I've been there several times. A friend of mine, every time I used to go to Calcutta, he used to take me there after Mangal Arati. And it's called a massage, but actually it's not a massage. Sometimes they have 2 or 3 people giving one person a massage, but it's not a massage. They beat you up. That's the Indian way of doing a massage, actually beating you. Yeah. So why would they go all the way to Haridwar to take bath in the Ganges? Well, that's the point. They're going to these different places of pilgrimage just to take a bath, but not to hear the discourses of pure devotees. The real reason, but here we see that these great sages that came to on the banks of the Ganges, not really to take a bath. They came there to hear Sukhadev Goswami speak to Maharaj Parikshit. And that's the real meaning of pilgrimage, going to a place, a holy place, where you can hear the discourses of pure devotees or genuine devotees. So when Maharaj Parikshit sat down on the bank of the Ganges, the news spread in all directions of the universe. And the great-minded sages who could follow the importance of the occasion all arrived there on the plea of pilgrimage. Actually, they came to meet Maharaj Parikshit, and not to take a bath of pilgrimage, because all of them were competent enough to sanctify the places of pilgrimage. Common men go to pilgrimage sites to get themselves purified of all sins. Thus, the places of pilgrimage become overburdened with the sins of others. But when such sages visit overburdened places of pilgrimage, they sanctify the places by their presence. Therefore, the sages who came to meet Maharaj Parikshit were not very much interested in getting themselves purified like common men, but on the plea of taking a bath in that place, they came to meet Maharaj Parikshit because they could foresee that Srimad Bhagavatam would be spoken by Sukhadev Goswami. All of them wanted to take advantage of the great occasion. So now I want to go back and review some things that we heard about Maharaj Parikshit, because I think it's very instructive that we understand a little more deeply exactly what we read before. One thing that's very interesting, we learned something that is a little astonishing, that Sutta Goswami, the person who was speaking to the sages or preaching the sages in Naimisharanya, and we did say that one of these days we're going to have a pilgrimage to Naimisharanya and hear Srimad Bhagavatam. I hope that happens. Of course, our COVID stopped us from doing that, but we'll pick up once things go back to normal. Well, 5,000 years ago, Sutta Goswami, Sukhadev Goswami first spoke Srimad Bhagavatam on the bank of the Ganges. But later on, Sutta Goswami again spoke, and Sutta Goswami was present when Sukhadev Goswami spoke, and then he re-spoke the Bhagavatam in Naimisharanya, where there was a huge convention of great sages. But Sutta Goswami did not take birth in a Brahmana family. Sutta Goswami did not take his birth in a Brahmana family. He was born in a family of mixed caste, or an uncultured low family. But because of higher association like Sri Sukhadev Goswami and the great rishis of Naimisharanya, certainly the disqualification of inferior birth was washed off. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu followed this principle in pursuance of the Vedic usages, and by his transcendental association he elevated many low-born or those disqualified by birth or action to the status of devotional service and established them in a position of acharyas or authorities. And then, a little later in this purport, this is 1:18, Prabhupada writes, "Such is the power of pure devotees of the Lord. The Ganges water is accepted as pure, and one can become purified after taking a bath in the water of the Ganges. But as far as the great devotees of the Lord are concerned, They can purify a degraded soul even by being seen by the low-born, and what to speak of association. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to purify the whole atmosphere of the polluted world by sending qualified preachers all over the world, and it remains with the Indians to take up this task scientifically and thus do the best kind of humanitarian work. The mental diseases of the present generation are more acute than bodily diseases. It is quite fit and proper to take up the preaching of Srimad Bhagavatam all over the world without delay. Mahatmanam Abhidhana also means dictionary of great devotees, or a book full of the words of great devotees. Such a dictionary of the words of great devotees and those of the Lord are in the Vedas and allied literatures, especially the Srimad Bhagavatam. So Lord Chaitanya's plan was to make a huge number of preachers who could go all over the world and preach Krishna consciousness and heal the mental diseases of the people of Kali Yuga. The mental diseases are much more acute than the physical diseases. And we see that. People act crazy all the time. Insane behavior. So this is an interesting point. Then Srila Prabhupada writes more specifically about what we're talking about. In the incidents of Maharaj Parikshit and Samika Rishi and Shringi, it says, when Maharaj Parikshit entered the door of Samika Rishi, he did not expect a royal reception by the Rishi, because he knew that saints and rishis are not materially rich men. But he never expected that a seat of straw, a glass of water, and some sweet words would be denied to him. He was not an ordinary guest, nor was he an enemy of the rishi, and therefore the cold reception by the rishi astonished the king greatly. As a matter of fact, the king was right to get angry with the rishi when he needed a glass of water very badly. To become angry in such a grave situation was not unnatural for the king, but because the king himself was not less than a great saint, his becoming angry and taking action were astonishing. So it must be accepted that it was so ordained by the supreme will of the Lord. The king was a great devotee of the Lord, and the saint was also as good as the king. But by the will of the Lord, the circumstances were so created that they became ways to the king's becoming unattached to family connection and governmental activities, and thus becoming a completely surrendered soul unto the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. The merciful Lord sometimes creates such awkward positions for his pure devotees in order to drag them toward himself from the mire of material existence. But outwardly, the situations appeared to be frustrating to the devotees. The devotees of the Lord are always under the protection of the Lord, and in any condition, frustration or success, the Lord is the supreme guide for the devotees. The pure devotees, therefore, accept all conditions of frustration as blessings from the Lord. And then there's a reference in the Adi Lila, 2nd chapter, 10th verse. And basically it says that the Lord creates certain situations for pure devotees, or for, advanced devotees, to take them away from all attachments by force. So then it says, for a king like Maharaj Parikshit to become angry and envious, especially at a sage and a brahmana, was undoubtedly unprecedented. The king knew well that brahmanas, sages, children, women, and old men are always beyond the jurisdiction of punishment. Similarly, the king, even though he commits a great mistake, is never to be considered a wrongdoer. But in this case, Maharaj Parikshit became angry and envious at the sage due to his thirst and hunger by the will of the Lord. The king was right to punish his subject for coldly receiving him or neglecting him. But because the culprit was a sage and a brahmana, it was unprecedented. As the Lord is never envious of anyone, so also the Lord's devotee is never envious of anyone. The only justification for Maharaj Parikshit's behavior is that it was ordained by the Lord. So this is the main point. First of all, the king had a right to punish the Rishi, although normally Brahmanas are never punished, because the Rishi ignored him, and the king was suffering from a condition of hunger and thirst. But for the king to get angry and do something foolish, the understanding is that this was organized by the Lord. It was not an ordinary situation. And then it says, while leaving, the king, being so insulted, picked up a lifeless snake with his bow and angrily placed it on the shoulder of the sage. Then he returned to his place. And Prabhupada says, the king thus treated the sage tit for tat, although he was never accustomed to such silly actions. By the will of the Lord, the king, while going away, found a dead snake in front of him, and he thought that the sage, who had coldly received him, thus might be coldly rewarded by being offered a garland of a dead snake. In the ordinary course of dealing, this was not very unnatural, but in the case of Maharaj Parikshit's dealing with the Brahmana sage, this was certainly unprecedented. It so happened by the will of the Lord, and that's called providence. Providence means the will of the Lord. He organizes certain situations for a purpose, just like he put Arjuna into illusion. That is impossible because Arjuna is the Lord's constant companion. How can it be an illusion? But it was arranged by the Lord so that the Bhagavad Gita could be spoken. And the same way, this anger by Maharaj Parikshit or enviousness by Maharaj Parikshit was arranged by the Lord. It's not due to any sinful action that he performed in the past. Now we'll get to that. So, then again it says, upon returning, he began to contemplate and argue within himself whether the sage had actually been in meditation, with senses concentrated and eyes closed, or whether he had just been feigning or faking trance just to avoid receiving a lower kshatriya. So, now this is a very important purport. It says, the king, being a devotee of the Lord, did not approve of his own action, and thus he began to wonder whether the sage was really in a trance or was just pretending in order to avoid receiving the king, who was a kshatriya and therefore lower in rank. Prabhupada says, repentance comes in the mind of a good soul as soon as he commits something wrong. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Srila Jiva Goswami do not believe that the king's action was due to his past misdeeds. In other words, a karmic reaction from his past life. The arrangement was so made by the Lord just to call the king back home, back to Godhead. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, the plan was made by the will of the Lord. That's called providence. And by the will of the Lord, the situation of frustration was created. The plan was that for his so-called misdeed, the king could be cursed by an inexperienced Brahmana boy infected by the influence of Kali, and thus the king would leave his hearth and home for good. His connections with Srila Sukhadev Goswami would enable the presentation of the great Srimad Bhagavatam, which is considered to be the book incarnation of the Lord. This book incarnation of the Lord gives much fascinating information of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, like his Rasa Leela with the spiritual cowherd damsels of Rajabhumi. Okay, so later on he says, by placing Arjuna and Pandavas in frustration due to the intrigue of their cousin brothers, the prelude of the Battle of Kurukshetra was created by the Lord. This was to incarnate the sound representative of the Lord Bhagavad Gita. So, by placing King Parikshit in an awkward position, the incarnation of Srimad Bhagavatam is created by the will of the Lord. Being distressed by hunger and thirst was only a show, because the king endured much even in the womb of his mother. he was never disturbed by the glaring heat of the Brahmastra released by Aswatthama. The king's distress condition was certainly unprecedented. The devotees like Maharaj Parikshit are powerful enough to forbear such distresses by the will of the Lord, and they are never disturbed. The situation in this case was therefore all planned by the Lord. Okay, so then in 11841, let's take a look at that. I just read from 11831. Now in 11841, Prabhupada says, in 11840 and then 41, the king threw the dead snake aside. Samika Rishi threw the dead snake aside and asked his son why he was crying, whether anyone had done him harm. On hearing this, the son explained to him what had happened. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, the father, Samika Rishi, did not take the dead snake on his neck very seriously. He simply threw it away. Actually, there was nothing seriously wrong in Maharaj Parikshit's act. But the foolish son took it very seriously, and being influenced by Kali, he cursed the king and thus ended a chapter of happy history. Then it says, the father heard from his son that the king had been cursed, although he should never have been condemned, for he was the best amongst all human beings. The Rishi did not congratulate his son, but on the contrary, he began to repent, saying, alas, what a great sinful act was performed by my son. He has awarded heavy punishment for an insignificant offense. In the purport, Prabhupada says, the king is the best of all human beings. He is the representative of God, and he is never to be condemned for any of his actions. In other words, the king can do no wrong. The king may order hanging of a culprit, son of a brahmana, but he does not become sinful for killing a brahmana. Even if there is something wrong with the king, he is never to be condemned. A medical practitioner may kill a patient by mistaken treatment, but such a killer is never condemned to death. So what to speak of a good and pious king like Maharaj Parikshit? In the Vedic way of life, the king is trained to become a Rajarsi, or a great saint, although he is ruling as king. It is the king only who, by whose good government, the citizens can live peacefully and without any fear. The Rajarsis would manage their kingdoms so nicely and piously that their subjects would respect them as if they were the Lord. That is the instruction of the Vedas. The king is called Narendra, or the best among human beings. Samika Rishi was an experienced good brahmana. He did not approve of the actions of his condemned son. He began to lament for all that his son had done. The king was beyond the jurisdiction of curses as a general rule, and what to speak of a good king like Maharaj Parikshit. The offense of the king was most insignificant, and his being condemned to death was certainly a very great sin for Shringi. Therefore, Rishika Samika regretted the whole incident. And then, the next verse says, "O my boy, your intelligence is immature, and therefore you have no knowledge that the king, who is the best amongst human beings, is as good as the personality of Godhead. He is never to be placed on an equal footing with common men. The citizens of the state live in prosperity, being protected by his unsurpassable prowess or power." So kings, especially someone like Maharaj Parikshit, is never to be placed on an equal footing with common men. And then he says, "My dear boy, the Lord who carries the wheel of a chariot is represented by the monarchical regime, and when this regime is abolished, the whole world becomes filled with thieves who then at once vanquish the unprotected subjects like scattered lambs." Okay, so then in 1846, it says, "When such a king is tired and fatigued, being stricken with hunger and thirst, he does not at all deserve to be cursed." After explaining the general codes relating to the royal position and asserting that the king can do no wrong and therefore is never to be condemned, the sage Samika wanted to say something about Emperor Parikshit specifically. The specific qualification of Maharaj Parikshit is summarized herein. The king, even calculated as a king only, was most celebrated as a ruler who administered the religious principles of the royal order. In the Shastras, the duties of all castes and orders of society are prescribed. All the qualities of a Kshatriya mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita 1843 were present in the person of the emperor. He was also a great devotee of the Lord and a self-realized soul. Cursing such a king when he was tired and fatigued with hunger and thirst was not at all proper. Samika Rishi thus admitted from all sides that Maharaj Parikshit was cursed most unjustly. Although all the brahmanas were aloof from the incident, still, for the childish action of a brahmana boy, the whole world situation was changed. Thus, Rishi Samika, a brahmana, took responsibility for all deterioration of the good orders of the world. Then, on 1/1849, it says, the sage thus regretted the sin committed by his own son. He did not take the insult paid by the king very seriously. Purport by Prabhupada. The whole incident is now cleared up. Maharaj Parikshit's garlanding the sage with a dead snake was not at all a very serious offense, but Shringi's cursing the king was a serious offense. The serious offense was committed by a foolish child only. Therefore he deserved to be pardoned by the Supreme Lord, although it was not possible to get free from the sinful reaction. Maharaj Parikshit also did not mind the curse offered to him by a foolish brahmana. On the contrary, he took full advantage of the awkward situation, and by the great will of the Lord, Maharaj Parikshit achieved the highest perfection of life through the grace of Srila Sukhadev Goswami. Actually, it was the desire of the Lord, and Maharaj Parikshit, Rishi Samika, and his son Shringi were all instrumental in fulfilling the desire of the Lord. So none of them were put into difficulty because everything was done in relation with the Supreme Person. And finally, so here we see this is a highly exceptional situation. It is not an ordinary situation. So when it says, like later on it says, and the best example is Maharaj Parikshit himself, who was a recognized sinless, pious king. But he also became a victim of an offense, even though he was ever unwilling to commit such a mistake. He was cursed also, but because he was a great devotee of the Lord, even such reverses of life became favorable. The principle is that one should not willingly commit any sin in his life, and should constantly remember the lotus feet of the Lord without deviation. Only in such a mood will the Lord help the devotee make regular progress toward the path of liberation, and thus attain the lotus feet of the Lord, even if there are accidental sins committed by the devotee. The Lord saves the surrendered soul from all sins, as confirmed in all scriptures. So that's the whole point of this whole pastime. Maharaj Parikshit, he was in the womb of his mother when the Brahmastra came to destroy him. And he tolerated that. And of course, Lord Krishna saved him. So he was not disturbed by hunger and fatigue. But the situation was created by Krishna in order to have Maharaj Parikshit hear the Srimad Bhagavatam for the benefit of the whole world. Just like Arjuna's situation of so-called illusion was created so that Bhagavad Gita could be spoken by Krishna. So we cannot take this as an ordinary example. Maharaj Parikshit was not sinful in any way. And Prabhupada goes to great extent, great efforts to show that this whole thing was arranged by the Lord. It was not due to any karmic reaction of Maharaj Parikshit. And also, the real takeaway of this whole episode is that even if a person does commit a sin, if they continue in devotional service, it's excused. Even a horrible sin like killing a brahmana. It doesn't mean that the sinful reaction is annulled, but the act of the sin is excused. So the sinful reaction is that brahmanas in Kali Yuga will not act properly, and they'll create havoc because of this. But why is it that brahmanas in Kali Yuga don't act properly? It's because many of them were demons in their previous life, and to redeem themselves, because they were associating with the Lord, but improperly, they were given birth in Brahmana families so they could make more spiritual advancement. But many of them have not taken that advantage, and they've reverted back to their demoniac qualities, and are creating havoc in Kali Yuga. So anyway, there's a few points about this pastime. We should not get stuck on thinking that Maharaj Parikshit has committed a sin like an ordinary person. The whole thing was arranged by Krishna. It's a special condition. And that's why there's great there's great emphasis made by Srila Prabhupada to this fact. Okay, are there any questions?
So I think maybe I'm trying to connect the dots that because the demons in the prior yuga, they were associated with the Lord, so that gave them
Some benefit.
some benefit. And then I think in the 6th chapter, the Lord says that any amount of progress for a yogi,
Now,
gives them...
Brahmanastosti pratijayana vidyate swapam abhyasya dharmasya chayate mahato bhayat. In this effort, there's never any loss or diminution. Anything done in like devotional service, the positive effect remains with you. So at the next point in your life, you start from the point you left off.
So that's why they were blessed to be born in the Brahmana family in the Kali Yuga, but because
and given a chance to make spiritual progress.
But their tendencies are not fully cleared, so...
Well, I mean, all of us have this choice, right? If we have a human body, it's because we've done something piously previously, and we've come to this human body. If we're born in a good family, it means we were very pious previously. But we have free will. We can go either way. We can continue to make progress, or we can associate with the wrong people, become contaminated, and go back to animal life. So we have the choice. At any moment, a person can commit sinful activity, either willingly or unwillingly. We're always committing sinful activity, right? But if we willingly do it, then that's very, very serious.
But the fact that a predominant set of Brahmins are doing this in Kali Yuga, is that again the will of the Lord?
No, it's their own choice.
Hmm.
It's their own choice. It's due to bad association, it's due to modern education, due to the omnipresence of impersonalism, which is an atheistic philosophy. And just like we talked about Guru, Brahma, Guru, Krishna, Guru Mahadev, Guru, so forth. It's actually a mantra from a Skanda Purana, which is in the mode of ignorance. Right? That's why Vaishnavas never say that mantra. Although it may be said maybe with some right understanding also, but today the understanding is always that it's a Mayavadi mantra. They think they're all equal. So no, it's Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Mahadev. So they always repeat it, but actually their understanding of it is that all three are equal. I mean, that's not a fact. Already Bhrigu Muni proved thousands and thousands of years ago that Lord Vishnu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But yet, they still maintain these misconceptions today. Those are that's due to bad association.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, we'll stop right there. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.